Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Abby LeMay, and I'm the Vice President of Global Impact Initiatives here at the World Federation of Youth Clubs. I'm very excited today to be joined by a special guest from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as we talk about a very important topic, internet safety. And before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items to review together today. First is our agenda. We'll review a couple of items, including how to listen to this presentation in Spanish. We'll hear an introduction about Belinda, and she will take it away with a presentation on internet safety, how to protect youth, what trends to be aware of, and importantly, tools and resources that you can use as youth club leaders and professionals to help keep our young people safe. We'll have plenty of time for questions and next steps. So before we begin today, just a reminder that, as always, this session is recorded and a link to this recorded session will be emailed to you. We hope that you will share this recording with your staff, volunteers, peers, and anyone else who works with young people or cares about young people so that they can be well equipped and informed to help protect young people online. I'm happy to share that today's session is going to be delivered in English. However, we do have live Spanish interpretation today, and you can do that by clicking on the interpretation button at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We're going to pause for just a moment while our webcast host, Tony, turns over the translation to Jennifer, our translator, to share those instructions in Spanish on how to listen in Spanish.
Sobre cómo escuchar. Muy buenos días con todos, soy Jennifer, su intérprete. La interpretación en español está disponible hoy. Por favor, haga clic en el botón Interpretación donde está el globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla para escuchar la interpretación en vivo al español. Muchas gracias. Okay, I'm ready.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Next slide, please. A few more quick reminders before we get started. If you are new to the World Federation of Youth Clubs, or if you've been with us for a while and have attended our webinars in the past, you might notice that this webcast looks a little bit different than it has in the past. That's because this is a Zoom webinar and not a Zoom meeting. So that means the only faces you'll see and voices you'll hear are those who are our panelists and staff today. You cannot see any other participants, but you can interact with us. So please use the chat function, ask questions. You can raise your hand, and you can actually use the Q&A feature to send questions directly to myself, to Tony, and to our team who is managing the webinar today. Lastly, we'd like to suggest the best way to view this screen is to click on View and then Speaker View or side-by-side Speaker View. So without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce you to Belinda Beltran-Swan, who is the Program Manager at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Belinda, thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to learn from you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, each and every one of you, for making time to learn more about this topic. I understand that many of you are in places throughout the world, and it is truly my honor to spend some time with you today. I want you to know that this is absolutely your time. While we'll have time at the end of the presentation for questions, don't hesitate to start to put those in the chat so we can get to them. I really want you to engage and feel that you've walked away from today's presentation feeling more educated about the topic. I'd also like to share that some of the information we're going to talk about can be a little uncomfortable. It can also make us a little fearful. And I understand that. I understand that as a professional that works in this space, and I understand that as a mother. So I do ask that you just take a deep breath and understand that although you may feel a little uncomfortable, on the other side of feeling uncomfortable is feeling empowered. I hope it is my goal that after today's presentation, you'll feel empowered with information, with knowledge, and with actionable items, steps that you can take to help to keep the kids in your care, the kids that attend your programming, and the kids in your personal lives safer online. So again, do be kind to yourself, and I recognize if you need to take a deep breath, please do so. It is very helpful as we navigate some of these topics. Next slide, please. So I'd first like to talk to you a little bit about who we are. As Abby mentioned, I do work for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC. Many of you may remember us. Well, many of you of a certain age, like myself, may remember us from missing children's posters on the back of milk cartons in the 1980s. Of course, that has evolved into digital formats and all kinds of other ways that we work to help and support families, law enforcement, and child welfare professionals. You may also recognize the National Center by one of our more famous founders, John Walsh, and his wife, Reve Walsh, were one of the families that helped to found the National Center. Other families that supported this work included the family of some of the victims of the Atlanta child murders, and also Eton Pates and other high-profile cases in the late 70s and early 80s. As you may know, Adam and Reve Walsh tragically lost their own son. I'm so sorry, John and Reve Walsh tragically lost their own son, Adam, who was only 6 years old when he was abducted and later found deceased. And it was this passion to ensure that families could seek comfort in one another, that law enforcement could seek resources. You know, there's this famous line at the time where folks realized that it was easier to find a missing or track a missing car than a missing child. And so it was out of kind of this new understanding and these absolute tragedies that families came together to found the National Center. And I'm so proud to work here. As you can see on your slide, we were founded in 1984. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. We are congressionally funded in part to operate 15 programs, including our outreach initiatives, such as our presentation today. And we do serve as a national resource center for families, law enforcement, and other professionals. However, I will also talk to you about ways that we work with international law enforcement and communities to keep kids safe as well as we progress throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, a lot of folks do recognize us for our efforts in the missing children space, but we do so much more than that. We also work diligently to reduce child sexual exploitation, which is at the heart of our conversation today. We're going to spend the majority of our time together talking about internet safety, and internet safety issues certainly include exploitation of children, child sexual exploitation to be specific. Preventing future victimization is also one of the pillars of our mission, and again is why we're here today, so that we can educate one another, ask questions, and know where to go when we need help. Hope is why we're here. We live it and breathe it, and we hope that after today's presentation, again, that you'll know where to go to seek resources, to seek guidance, and that you'll have a little bit more understanding of the topic of internet safety. Next slide, please. Internet safety trends. What the cyber tip line reports tell us. And you don't have to raise your hand or answer or take yourself off of mute, but I'd like to ask if anyone on the call is familiar with the cyber tip line. If you're not, let me tell you a little bit about how this works. The cyber tip line is one of two mechanisms that people can utilize to file a report with the National Center or to seek guidance or information. 1-800-THE-LOST is our hotline, which is operated every day, holidays, 24 hours a day. We work with Language Line to provide folks information in the language that they need assistance with. And the cyber tip line functions as well online all day, every day, and is staffed by our analysts and case managers as well. So because we have are able to collect so much information based on these reports that we receive to the hotline and to the tip line, we're able to talk to you today about trends that we're seeing in real time. We're able to recognize and highlight things that are affecting our kids and pivot to create resources and public awareness about the things that we absolutely know are affecting our children. Next slide, please. So how does the cyber tip line work? I want to share with you that right before our presentation, I reached out to our executive director of our Exploited Children Division. I said, I want to make this clear to everyone in the audience for this call. Who can file a cyber tip line report? And she said, everyone. And she reminded me, and I'd love to emphasize that with you as well. We work with international partners throughout the world to help resolve these cases. When in doubt, if you have a question, you'd like some guidance, file a cyber tip line report. I encourage you to do so. As I mentioned, we can help to make sure that we provide information in the language that is best suited to your needs. And we can also ideally connect you with international partners and agencies that we work with regularly to help find or to bring perpetrators to justice and to find resources for children wherever you live in the world. So how does a cyber tip line report work? You will log on, ideally, you would log on to the website that you can see on the screen. You can also call 1-800-THE-LOST if you just want some guidance and help through the process. You would complete the online form, which is very intuitive and very easy to complete. And with that information, our analysts, who let me tell you are absolutely amazing, will prioritize that report. Is this a priority 1 report? Is a child in imminent danger right now this second? A priority 2, we recognize there is victimization, may not necessarily be happening right now, obviously still a very important priority. And 3 and E, these are where things get a little bit more murky. Perhaps a child is not in imminent danger. Perhaps these are images, videos, photos, or reports that do not indicate an imminent threat to a child. So our analysts, again, have access to tools and open source analytical services so that they can find ideally an IP address, right, which serves as kind of a fingerprint for someone's internet connection and where they may have conducted some of this exploitation toward a child. So we'll add value to those reports. So it's so much more than simply saying this bad thing happened, we need help. Once that report is filed with the cyber tip line at NCMEC, our analysts are really able to dig deep and see if there are any clues that we can find in those photos, those videos, those chat logs. We're also able to run that information against the millions upon millions of reports that we receive every year at the National Center to see if this perpetrator may not have also exploited a different child. Has this child been reported previously in a different area, in a different state, in a different country? How can we amass this information, utilize this amassed information to find a child who's been victimized and to bring a perpetrator to justice? So our analysts will put together a report, and based on the information and the analysis that they have conducted, they can determine where this report needs to go. So whether that's someplace in Latin America, whether that's someplace in Africa, whether that's someplace in Florida, Texas, or New York, wherever that is in the world, as I mentioned, we work with international partners and of course law enforcement agencies throughout the country, the United States. We will send that report to our partners so that they can begin to investigate. So many benefits to reporting to the cyber tip line. Of course, we encourage you to report to your local law enforcement as well, and you will be encouraged to do so when you file that report. Ultimately, again, we work very closely with law enforcement. We need their assistance so that we can find children who have been harmed and bring those perpetrators to justice. Next slide, please. So who is reporting to the cyber tip line? Take a quick look at the snapshot over the last several years. And I'd like to share that sometime in mid-March, we'll have a new report for data related to 2022. But for now, let's take a look at some of the trends. Of course, we can see in 2020, we were at the height of a lot of pandemic closures. We certainly saw a huge spike in reports from the public, but we continue to see a steady increase in reports to the National Center. And again, these are millions of reports. And behind every single one of these reports is a suspected instance where a child has been exploited sexually. And that is very overwhelming. I understand, I say this and I've presented this information many, many times, and it still never, ever fails to make me a little sad and a little scared. There is, again, a child behind each and every single one of these reports. But I think it's important that you understand also that it's not just electronic service providers. And what does that mean? Well, we partner with organizations such as Meta, Google, and so on and so forth. And they certainly don't want to maintain this content on their platforms. And so they work closely with us to file reports. And of course, we also consistently receive reports from the public as well. So a little snapshot about from whom we receive these reports, how many reports we see over the course of a year, just in the combined millions and millions of reports each year. Next slide, please. So now we know a little bit, hopefully we understand what the cyber tip line is, the benefits of reporting. One thing I failed to mention that I'd like to add about reporting to the cyber tip line, you will also receive follow-up phone calls from our case managers to ask if there were any mental health supports and services that we can provide to the victim at the core of the case. While we don't provide direct services, we have a vast network of mental health providers and survivors and family members of those who have been exploited, or some families still have a child that's missing, and they give of themselves to work with other families to talk to them, because oftentimes when you're in this type of a crisis, you really just want to talk to someone who you think understands you. And we offer some of those services. So when you either call 1-800-THE-LOST or report to the cyber tip line, you're also going to have an opportunity to discuss some of those supports and how to access them as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. So increase in reports to the cyber tip line overall, as we just discussed. But one thing that's important that I wanted to highlight, when we take a look at the data and start to pull out different subcategories, there's something quite alarming that we continue to see at the National Center. We continue to see an increase in online enticement reports. So what exactly is online enticement? Next slide, please. Online enticement includes all of the categories that you see here. This is a list by order of the frequency that we receive these reports at the National Center. So at the National Center, I wanted to make a clarification. We do not use the term child pornography. And again, we're talking about uncomfortable topics, but on the other side is empowerment and education and understanding. So stay with me. So at the National Center, we do not refer to child pornography as such. We refer to it as child sexual abuse material. And I want to tell you why. The term child pornography, you know, whether we care to admit it or not, because of the vernacular, it almost implies, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, that the child had something to do with it, or some sort of ability to participate, to consent. And we know that is not possible. A child cannot consent to being included in these awful images, videos, and acts of sexual abuse. So let's call it what it is. These are child sexual abuse materials. These are images, these are videos of children being sexually assaulted. So here at the center, you will never hear us say CP or child pornography. So moving forward in the presentation, you'll hear me say CSAM, and that's what I'm referring to, child sexual abuse materials. That is by far the largest type of report that we receive via the cyber tip line. It's with regard to CSAM. Next is online enticement, as we mentioned, shooting up so high every year, more and more reports related to online enticement. So it's important to recognize that trend. Child sex trafficking, child sex tourism, and so on and so forth. I'll just say quickly, misleading domain names. I often get questions, what does that even mean? You know, there are people in this world who clearly have nothing better to do than to think of ways, new and innovative ways to try to harm our children. So what does misleading domain name mean? It could be something as simple as taking a popular children's website, PBS perhaps, or whitehouse.gov or .org, and changing that to a .com, and then uploading obscene material with the hope of exposing children or adults alike to those kinds of things. So that's what that means. And you can absolutely report that to the cyber tip line as well. So we can work with the companies that host those domains to take that stuff down. So that one's usually a little different, and not something we think about when we think of different ways that children are exploited. So I just wanted to highlight that and help you to understand what that meant. But again, this is a pretty comprehensive list of the different types of reports that we see at the National Center. A few key takeaways at this point in our presentation that, we understand what the tip line is, how to report, some of the trends, and one of the most important trends to consider consider is that we continue to see an increase in online enticement reports, and online enticement certainly covers an entire category of ways that children are being trafficked. So let's talk a little bit more about what those types of enticement look like, some other trends that we're seeing at the National Center. Next slide, please. One of the largest trends that we're seeing at the National Center are issues related to youth-produced explicit content. We're seeing youth-produced content in children of all ages. And I know when you hear that, that's scary, especially if you're like me and you're a mom. I have a 7-year-old and you think all ages. My kid, my baby, she's just a baby. But what I challenge you to consider is that we as the adults are the folks that are usually providing access to the internet to our kids, are we not, right? Whether it's a tablet as part of your after school programming, whether it's free time to work on homework and other things at your after school program, whether it's at home with your child. You know, I've been there. You have a busy day, you have a day full of meetings, you need to catch up on some things and, you know, go play some video games and put on your headphones, right? We as the adults need to recognize that if we are giving children access to the internet, if we are telling them that it's okay to be online, to play games, to do homework, to do all of the kinds of things that they want to do, then we also have to have important conversations with them about how to stay safe. So that's one key takeaway here that I hope that you will resonate with you. The other thing I'd like to point out is that this generation of children, you know, and I joke, I am, you know, I'm 44 years old, and I know fully well that I partly just don't have time to keep up with all of the trends of the things that kids are enjoying online, the different apps, all of the different things. And secondly, that even if I did have the time, I would never fully understand or be able to keep up with all of those trends. You know, I hear from some kids in my own family, and as I continue to present to different audiences, a lot of kids have said recently, TikTok is over, right? We're not on TikTok anymore because my mom's on TikTok doing videos, right? And so again, it seems like right when we catch up with the latest trend, our kids have moved on to the next thing. It's impossible for us to say that we can maintain each and every single one of those trends and understand. So what we can try to do is to understand maybe why children are engaging in some of these behaviors. I challenge you, and this can make us uncomfortable, but I challenge you to consider who you were at this age, right? At 12, 13, 14, 15. Your bodies are changing. You're starting to recognize feelings. Maybe you've had your first crush. You want to feel valued. You want to feel attractive. You want to feel popular, all of these kinds of things. You want to feel connected. You want to feel loved. Even the most well-adjusted child, human, adult wants to feel, we all want to feel these kinds of things. And we've certainly all experimented and had questions about sex and our sexuality, right? Well, you know, where 20, 30 years ago, when I was a kid and a teenager, maybe, and again, I will always be honest with you and frank with you, maybe that meant someone had a VHS tape or a magazine with inappropriate content and brought that to school, right? Nowadays, children can simply log online and type in a few words into a search bar and be exposed to all of these things and more. So we have several things happening at the same time. We have what's happened every generation over time. Children start to have questions. They start to want to be fulfilled by a connection, friendships, and even interested in you know, dating and so on and so forth. And then we have the infiltration of the internet where everything is intertwined. And I use this as an illustration when I go grocery shopping with my daughter, again, 7 years old, whether it's a snack of goldfish crackers or a candy bar, there's always some sort of QR code or a website to play a game, to learn more about the candy bar. And she wants to do those things. She doesn't know a world without the internet, is what I'm trying to say. So before we judge children for participating in any one of these kinds of trends that we continue to see, I just wanted us to level set. Let's recognize that today's children are still experiencing all of the kinds of issues and things that we did as children. However, they have the entire world in their pocket when they have access to the internet. So let's cast aside our preconceived notions. Let's cast aside our judgment about whether or not children should be participating and why did they do this, and why didn't they make a better choice. Instead, let's try to understand and meet children where they are. So now that we have that kind of understanding, we're going to try our best to take off our blinders and empathize with children so that we can help them, so that we can be trusted adults. Let's talk about some of the trends we're seeing. Absolutely, children are sexting. Online enticement, you're going to hear that over and over again because it continues to be a trend that affects our children more and more. Sextortion. The National Center and the FBI released a joint public safety message just a few weeks ago because sextortion is an issue that is on the rise. It especially is affecting young boys. And it's not necessarily even, and just as a definition, it's just, of course, the joining of two words, sex and extortion. So essentially, a young child will be online. They're communicating with someone that they believe is a potential romantic partner. And after this perpetrator gets the child to believe that they are in fact in a monogamous, happy relationship, they'll start to ask for explicit images of the child. And as soon as the perpetrator receives those images or those videos, they will turn on them and start to ask either for more photos, more videos. But what we're starting to see in this trend related to sextortion is instances where perpetrators are asking for money. And think about, again, when you were 13, 14, 15, you had no money. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. We as an adult would love to just go in and say, that's okay, things are going to get better. We're here for you. This is going to blow over. Nobody will remember in a few months, few years. But the child that is experiencing this oftentimes thinks there's no hope. And we've certainly seen some absolutely heartbreaking outcomes. So again, we need to understand what these issues are so that we can talk to our kiddos about what to do if this happens to them. And again, if you have a child and an internet connection, the statistics are high that they will be exploited in some way, right? So we have to prepare them with information, and we have to prepare ourselves. So a little bit on sextortion. It is a rising trend. It especially affects young men, absolutely affects young women, but we've seen an uptick in this with regard to young men. Again, for money, not even necessarily for sex acts. So something to consider and something you can absolutely learn more about on our website. Live streaming. If you have a gamer in the house, you have gamers in your child youth service program, you know that and they have access to internet and they have access to some of these technologies and some of these games, you know that this is a very important part of their socialization. This matters to them. Oftentimes, many children are making long-term friendships over some of these live streaming services. And, some children enjoy watching other kids playing games online as well. So certainly an issue there, and another opportunity for children to either be exposed to some of these sexual exploitation issues or to participate in because they've been coerced to do so. So again, a little overwhelming, I understand, but I just want to be clear that we are seeing some of these trends in children of all ages. So does this mean, I often get questions like, so are children, this generation's just bad? No, this generation just has an insane amount of access to devices, to the world, to one another that has just never been seen before. Next slide. I'd also like to be clear that NCMEC has received reports of online enticement of children on almost every digital platform. I get asked oftentimes, okay, well, I run this after-school youth program, I have this youth sports program, but we also do some homework and some mentoring, and we let them, we have a couple of computers set up. So which apps or which programs should we just block and delete? Well, there's no right answer because, again, we've received reports related to almost every platform. So it's not necessarily an issue of which platform or which app we need to get rid of. It's an issue of educating ourselves and educating our children, having conversations with our children, and knowing what to do to be a trusted adult. And again, each and every single one of you on this call is in this space and does this work because you care about children. So I venture to say that you're already viewed as a trusted adult in your community and in the work that you do. So let's help you to be a trusted adult about these particular issues. Next slide, please. So, and please, if I'm running over time, let me know. You can give me the proverbial hook and I'll speak a little quicker. So I'm going to share some data with you, And Tony, if you'd like to share the link to the Thorn study or the Thorn website, they're one of our partners. We're very proud to work with them. As you know, it can be difficult to conduct analysis and have access to children to garner their insights. But the Thorn organization has done just that, and we're so glad to be able to share some of the information that they have put together to help us understand, again, why kids are participating in some of these behaviors. So we'll talk about this quickly. The question or the statement was, it is okay to share a nude photo or video of yourself with someone online as long as, and let's take a quick look here. You are in a relationship with them. These are children aged 9 to 12 years old. 14 and 17%, as you can see on your slide. The numbers are higher for 13 through 17, and the numbers are higher for children who identify as LGBTQ+. It's okay if you know that you can trust them. If it can be maintained as a secret, if your parents, caregivers, or school doesn't find out, if your friends don't find out, or they don't show it to anyone else. Look at these numbers. Or if you've never met them, this is very concerning. Children 9 to 12, 2% thought that that was okay, 8% of boys, 9% 13 to 17-year-old girls, and 11% boys. So why do we pull out children who identify as LGBTQ+? I want to make this very clear. There is no indication that children who identify as LGBTQ+ are more sexualized or hypersexualized compared to their peers. Absolutely not. What we believe is that these children oftentimes struggle to make connections in real life or with people in their circle or even in their family, and may find more comfort or an ability to be themselves online instead. And unfortunately, what this means is oftentimes a higher instance of online sexual exploitation. So I just wanted to make that point very clear. 60% of kids place blame on the victim. So that's a problem, right? So what does this mean? A lot of children think that, well, if I'm not in the picture and I didn't take the picture or the video, but my friend sent it to me and I sent it to 200 of my friends, it's okay. I'm not doing anything wrong. That kid shouldn't have done it, right? That is not okay. We need to talk to children about what it means to re-victimize and what it means to share this content or to participate in this content. 1 in 5 of kids 13 to 17 said it's okay to share a nude as long as you send it over an app that doesn't save it. This is always troublesome because we know very well that no such app exists. This information can always be, at the very least, screenshotted and sent to others as well. So there's a false sense of security that children have. 47% of kids who have shared these images report feeling positive following the experience or exchange. Again, does this mean that this child is sexually active? Does this mean, I've even had some parents ask, does this mean my child is a sexual deviant? Absolutely not. Again, I challenge you to consider some of the behaviors, curiosities, and questions that we've had when we were this age. And for a lot of children, it's a feeling of self-expression and validation, which again, we've got to talk to kids about safe parameters and what it means to be in a healthy relationship. And if these behaviors are extensions, do they reflect their long-term goals for themselves, their self-image? What are the consequences, right? So even for the kiddos who have positive feelings after engaging in this behavior, we have to have important conversations with them about some of the consequences of participating in this behavior. 36% of kids who've shared felt negatively. So the opposite, right? They felt shame, guilt, or uncomfortable after sharing those images. And 40%, this is a key takeaway, 40% agreed that it's normal for people my age to share nudes with each other. We have to understand kids where they are. We have to understand how they're navigating the world. We have to understand how they're socializing with each other. And I hope that this data helps us to understand a little bit more about how both sexuality and access to the internet are merging to create some of these trends. Next slide, please. A little bit more information to help us sincerely understand this issue. And I believe this one may have some animation. So from 2019 to 2020, we saw several increases in experiences with sharing self-generated CSAM. So let's take a look here. And some of these may be very disheartening and very scary for us, but that's okay. We're gonna talk about this together. We're gonna work through this together. So a few highlights: experiences sharing some of these some of these photos or videos. All minors, we saw an increase overall in all ages from 11 to 17%. We saw an increase in both girls and boys, but less so in girls, more so in boys. One particular age group of concern here, 11 to 12-year-olds, you can see here, jumped from 7 to 13%. 9 and 10 went from 3 to 15%. All 9 through 12-year-olds, a jump from 6 to 14. All 13 to 17-year-olds from 15 to 19, and a slight dip in young girls in that age. Again, I think this is just more evidence that we need to have some conversations with our children about these consequences, and quite frankly, about what to do if and when something gets out of their control. How can we help them? How can we help them navigate this? Because in the moment, children, especially if they have never had a conversation about internet safety, when something goes wrong, perhaps this photo that they shared with someone, right, a couple of slides ago, it was clear that many children oftentimes think that it's okay as long as it's with someone they trust. But oftentimes, even as adults, we break each other's trust. So what happens? What can a child do if and when that happens? We need to be prepared with those answers, and we need to be prepared to have honest conversations. And so we're going to talk about that here shortly. But I think it's important to highlight, as your slide says, 17% of kids have shared their own self-generated CSAM. 15% of 9 to 10-year-olds have shared their own self-generated CSAM, and 32% of kids who identify as LGBTQ+ youth have shared their own self-generated CSAM. Again, to reiterate, this is not an indication of a child's sexual whether or not they are sexually active. Again, we really believe that this is because so many children who identify as LGBTQ+ simply seek connection, friendship, and online because it's often too hard to do so, or they don't have those avenues, or not encouraged to do so in real life. So next slide, please. And for our children, online is real life. That's important to recognize. There's no more true distinction for children in many cases. So let's talk about why kids choose not to share. So we want to talk about how to have conversations with our kids. If we want to understand the direction that we can take our prevention programming, if we want to understand how best to reach children before they've participated or after, so on and so forth, let's try to understand why kids choose not to share. So in these same surveys, 2019 and 2020, the vast majority of kids were afraid that that photo would be leaked or shared without their consent, right? Many children noted that pride and self-respect was an issue. However, between 2019 and 2020, that dipped from 11% to 2%. So I think this is aligned with what we've seen in the previous slides, that this is just becoming a more normalized behavior for kids, right? I think the last slide or so said that 40% of the children surveyed shared that it's just something normal that kids their age do. And I think this statistic from 2019 to 2020 really reinforces that point. Parents wouldn't want their parents to find out. That went up by 1 percentage point, stayed pretty steady. They're just generally scared, personal insecurities, so on and so forth. Once it's out, you can't take it back. It stayed steady at 4%. And I wanted to highlight that because that'll come up again here in a minute. But let's take a look at the last one. It is illegal. That went up 3%, but it's still very low at 6%. So what we know is that if we just tell kids, don't do it because you could get in trouble with the police, that's not a huge deterrent at all for kids. And I think that we can extend that conversation to a lot of the things we hope that kids don't do. You know, you could get in trouble if you do this. Okay, right? Are we really moving the needle when we say just don't do it? We're not. However, when we talk to children about some of the consequences and risks, like, hey, you know what, that photo could get leaked and shared. It could affect, your parents could find out, you know, all of these other kinds of things. It's easier to form a baseline where we can say, yes, those concerns are valid. And here's how we can work through this issue together. So a little bit to understand about why kids choose not to share. I hope that that helps you to be in a better mind space to consider how we can talk to kids about this issue. Next slide, please. So a little bit more, and I'm sorry, I hope I'm not boring you to pieces with all of this data, but I really wanted you to see in real time why it's so important to reach children where they are and to try to understand where they are. Because if we try to project the way we were raised or the way we were socialized online 10, 15, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, we are going to miss the opportunity to really be able to empathize with the children that we serve. So overall, just to close out this kind of statistical analysis, overall from 2019 to 2020, you can see on the slide here experiences with resharing. So this is another issue we have to consider. So we're not only having conversations with children who potentially have been victimized and children who may be experiencing exploitation, but also those children who maybe not, as I mentioned before, maybe not necessarily participated directly, but are sharing those images and photos without consent with their friends and in their social circles. So all minors, you can see here, ages 9 to 12, 13 to 17, and so on and so forth. So this is the percentage of all minors who've reshared someone else's photos and the percentage of all minors who believe their close friends often or sometimes reshare another kid's images. So some pretty frightening numbers. We see some upward trends here across all age groups from 2019 to 2020 as well. Experiences with seeing non-consensually reshared photos. So this essentially what we're saying here. So these are children who have been exposed to these photos and images of others without consent, whether or not they had it on their phone or not. So think about the one kid who maybe has a cell phone, the one kid in the neighborhood who has access to play games online, the one child who knows how to navigate that computer at the after-school program and has shared or exposed others to some of these issues as well. So increases across the board in that category as well. So again, it's not just children who have potentially participated in some of these behaviors, it's also children who are being exposed to these things as well. Next slide, please. Finally, to round out this discussion before we talk about ways we can address this, and are we okay on time so far? Yeah.
We have about 15 minutes left, including time for questions.
For questions. Okay, great. So I'm going to kind of, well, I'm not going to speed. I don't want to do a disservice, but I will move a little more quickly, just to kind of close out that discussion about how we can better understand children and where they are. A few quotes from this that I think are very enlightening that help us to understand how we can best empathize with children. Online relationships can be quite personal and meaningful. For 1 in 3 young people, their closest friendships formed online. Please commit that to memory. These are important relationships and friendships for children. Flirting and dating online are viewed as common, even when it involves an adult or someone much older. While it was more common among teens, still roughly 1 in 3 9 to 12-year-olds believed it was common to flirt with other minors online. And 1 in 5, these are 9 to 12-year-olds, believed it was common to date a young adult online. Minors are regularly encouraged to leave an open forum for one-to-one environments. What does this mean? Essentially, if a child is gaming online on the platform, they are very quickly oftentimes asked by a stranger online or even someone that they know, oftentimes it's someone that they know, to chat on a third-party app. So maybe they're gaming and then they're asked to move the conversation to a third-party app while they're gaming. And this happens often and happens very quickly. Being made to feel uncomfortable by an online connection does not guarantee a minor will be ready to cut off contact. Nearly 1/4 of kids stayed in contact with someone online who made them uncomfortable. With LGBTQ+ youth, more than twice as likely to be in this position. I want you to consider as adults, if a friend of ours, someone, and again, children value these friendships online. These are very important connections to them. As an adult, if a good friend, someone we value, hurts our feelings, do we just totally disregard them? I mean, maybe some of us do. Maybe some of us do, but oftentimes if it's someone that's important to us, we're gonna hash it out. We're gonna work it out and we're gonna continue to maintain that friendship. So obviously children who value these online relationships and friendships are going to continue to do so even when they have been exposed to something that has made them uncomfortable. So essentially online grooming, examining risky encounters, findings from 2021, qualitative and quantitative among, so these were 9 to 17-year-olds, and the research was conducted by Thorne, just so you know. And the link to all of these studies and more was placed in the chat. Thank you, Tony. So a little bit about how we can understand where our kids are and understanding their relationship with the internet. Next slide, please. So what is the top threat facing young children online? Next slide. It's access, as I mentioned. If there is an internet connection and a smart device and a child, access is the issue. It's not the platform, it's not the age, it's not their level of understanding. It's simply put, it's access. And so again, most of us are in positions where we are providing that access to children. So we need to best understand how we can also put some parameters and some education for adults and children alike around this access. Again, if we feel that a child is old enough to have access to a laptop, computer, a gaming device, your cell phone, they're old enough to have these conversations. Next slide, please. So this can feel overwhelming, right? All of the things we talked about can feel very overwhelming. I've had people in the audience where I've spoken say, okay, well, I'm going to go home and change the Wi-Fi password. I'm going to just take away my child's phone. Or you know what, we're just not going to let kids do their homework online after school anymore. We just don't have the staff. We don't want to feel liable. Well, that's not necessarily a solution that's reasonable and feasible, right? So what can we do? Next slide, please. We have to work together. And today's the first step in this journey of working together to face these issues. Next slide, please. We have to work together. We have to seek connection. We have to seek resources. And you certainly have a new friend in Austin, Texas at NCMEC today. So for youth to hear us, they need to feel us. That's important, right? So now you understand why, you understand what they're doing. Hopefully you have a better understanding of why they're doing these things and participating in some of these behaviors. But we need to remember that children need to also feel respected as individuals, right? They need to be supported and encouraged. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because so many of you, all of you are already doing this and creating these wonderful environments for children to thrive. So we know that children need to feel heard. They need to feel that we care and that they're valued and special. All of these protective factors are really together help statistically for a child to feel more empowered to make not only better choices, to stand up for themselves and others, but to come to their trusted adult when something does happen. Next slide, please. And what are some ways that we can start to have these difficult conversations? NetSmart is our flagship internet safety programming. It is available right now currently in English and Spanish, but we continue to strive to work toward translating it into other languages. You can find this on our website. It is free. You can download tip sheets, presentations, discussion guides, and so many other resources to help you have age-appropriate internet safety conversations with children and other adults in your community. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have some tip sheets that you can download for free about topics like sexting, about topics like sextortion. And even if you aren't ready to necessarily have a full presentation with your students, although I encourage you to do so, you can place some of these posters around the building. And kids may think, oh, wow, this is happening to me. And now I know that my trusted adult at this organization understands the issue too. Now I know that I can talk to them about this. So that simple gesture of putting up a poster where children can see it also signals to them that you are fully prepared to talk about this and to provide resources to them. So another suggestion, and you can find these on our website as well. Next slide, please. Just a couple of quick slides to end us for the day, and then I'll open for questions. For children under 10 years old, I just wanted to make that link back to all of the studies and statistics we talked about earlier. So many of those increases in statistics were related to children under 10, right? So we developed Into the Cloud, which is an online web-based, it's a web-based cartoon series, and every episode deals with a different topic related to internet safety, and discussion guides are also available. So if you want to integrate this into your after-school programming, into your youth programming, the kids can watch the video, and then afterwards you can have an open and engaging conversation. We have questions, we have potential answers. The discussion guide will walk you through it, and it's a fantastic way to start the conversation to help keep kids safe, especially our youngsters. We have to build that foundation for our children as young as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and so on and so forth, so that they're prepared and empowered with information to make better choices and to stand up for themselves and others when they are confronted with one of the many ways that they can be exploited online. Next slide, please. And this is our last slide. It's our newest service. It's called Take It Down. If a child has already had their images placed online and they would like help, they can simply come to this website. Again, those days where we say, well, your image is out there, that's it, there's nothing we can do. Those days are gone. We can offer hope to children. The photos do not leave their device. Rather, we add, and I will spare you all of the technical jargon. I hopefully will have an opportunity to speak to each of you at the conference later this year. Please go register today and join us for the conference. We'll talk about more resources in depth and ways that you can implement these resources in your organizations. But I just wanted to share that this is our latest way or latest tool to help children to remove those images without shame. And we'll talk about all of those different logistics at our next opportunity together, I hope. So I just wanted to point you in this direction. If you have a child who makes an outcry, they have images online without their consent, you can come here for step-by-step on how to get those removed. We work with all of these different online service providers to remove those images. They usually do so within hours. So please, all else fails, give us a call, file a cyber tip line report, and we can walk you through this. This website and all of the coinciding resources are available in English and Spanish. Finally, I'd like to thank you again for giving me some of your time. I have my name here and my email address. Please, I do speak Spanish. I am bilingual. So if you feel more comfortable emailing me in Spanish, please do so. And let's work together. Let's share some resources. If you have any questions that you aren't comfortable asking, to the group, I understand. Please, I mean it when I tell you that you have a new friend in Austin, and I will help you. If I don't know the answer, I'll find someone smarter than me that does. Thank you so much for having me and for your time, and I would love to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Belinda. That was a lot of information, and yes, a difficult topic, but I think you said it perfectly in the beginning when you mentioned that the other side of discomfort is empowerment. So thank you for such a comprehensive overview. And now we're going to open it up to questions. So please take a moment, drop your question in the chat, or if you prefer, you can use the question and answer function to send a question directly to myself and to Tony, who are managing the Zoom meeting today. We do have one question that's already come through for Belinda, and it's, what is the best way to stay up to date about apps and websites that youth are using? You know, how do you keep up with all of the constant changing?
Absolutely, that's a great question. Often what we tell parents and youth serving organizations is that we have to have conversations with children at home. If you know that the child in your care, or your own child, is a gamer, maybe Friday night is game night. Maybe we're going to sit down and we're going to learn, we're going to teach mom, dad, grandma, grandpa how to play that game. We're going to make sure that when we purchase games or when we allow for the internet at our youth serving organization, that we understand we're doing spot checks to talk, and not in a way like, what are you doing? Give me your phone. But hey, that looks like fun. Tell me more about that app. Why do you like that app? Why is it fun? Can you show me how to use it? Those kinds of two-way conversations where we also give the child an opportunity to teach us. There are several different websites where you can, and I apologize, I will get this information to Tony and Abby to share after my mind has gone blank, but there is an organization that rates different websites, rates different apps, and provides analysis of whether or not they're age appropriate. Doesn't necessarily tell you which are popular, but can at least help you understand what they are. But I simply suggest that we have to have conversations with our kiddos, because as I mentioned, as soon as we think we understand which one's popular, their kids are like, nope, that's where the old people are now, right? 10 years ago, everybody on Facebook. Are kids on Facebook today? Absolutely not, right? And so again, it's all about having conversations, and especially if you are in some position where you're providing access and you're providing the devices, it's fair to have those two-way conversations to say, show me what you're playing. And I'll tell you, it's very effective. That's how I engage with my own child. She has to get permission first to download an app, and then I ask her why she wants that app, and then we go through all of the different things that the app can do. So it really is engaging children in two-way conversations about what they are doing and why.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. It's so important to make sure that that conversation is truly a conversation and a two-way
Yes.
discussion. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
We do have a similar question. How do you suggest starting the conversation about this topic at a youth club where perhaps this is kind of a difficult topic to talk about because of the culture and community, and if there's just a place where folks really don't feel comfortable discussing this with between parents and youth, how do we begin to break down some of those barriers and stigma?
I understand. And again, I'll speak on from a personal perspective. I am Tejana. I grew up in South Texas of Mexican American or Mexican descent. And so I know in my own home growing up, some of those conversations were very difficult. That was even before having the internet, right? So I think what's effective is when we do a holistic approach, when we have a holistic approach, we include the parents, the caregivers, and the children, not at the same time. And our materials allow for that. Our NetSmarts programming has a presentation, tip sheets, and speakers guides and points for parents, and then also coinciding presentations for children. But I think the caveat here, and something that I've seen work, on our website, we have a lot of statistics. None of it is meant to be alarming or to scare people into listening. But I think when we share with parents and families, this is what this national organization sees is happening. You know, statistically, this is what's happening. A child online has this chance of being exploited. Predators are always 2 steps ahead of our children. How can we be prepared? It's being very honest with parents. And I understand there are a lot of cultural spaces to navigate. And I would love to share, one of my colleagues is actually working on a presentation now specific to Latino families about how to navigate some of these conversations. And one of the things that came up first between she and I were brainstorming is starting with that base level of respect. We are not telling you how to parent your children. We just want to share this information with you. We know this is an issue and it's scary, but we have tools and we have friends at the National Center to help us. So the baseline is respect and being open and honest in sharing statistics. And again, I hate to just specifically to Spanish, but right now that's the only language we have most of our materials in other than English. But you can go on our website, pull statistics in Spanish, talking points in Spanish to start a conversation to say, you know, I went to this presentation and I learned that this is happening everywhere. And I know that we have to have this conversation. And we also have to compare it to other child abuse campaigns, which are also difficult to have conversations with, and you know, with parents, period. We also have to compare and make people understand that internet safety is just as important as teaching our children to wear their seatbelt, to look both ways before they cross the street. And one of the ways that I have had success too is challenging parents to think about it this way. Do you let your children go with strangers? Do you let them go to their friend's house, right? Okay, so the answer is yes, you let them go to their friend's house. What do you do first? Who's going to be there? Who are the parents? Where's their phone number? Where do they live? And how long are you going to be there? Same safety considerations need to be made online. I'm letting you play on my phone. What game are you going to play? Who are you chatting with and why? Do you know this person in real life? So again, it's challenging parents because we know they're already concerned and we know they're already having some kind of safety conversation, common sense safety conversation. It's helping them to understand why it's important that we include this as well. And I think when you see our safety programming too, you'll recognize that it's age appropriate. It's not overly sexual. It's not inappropriate. It's done so in a way where the child is learning, and oftentimes they don't even realize they're learning. It's just clicking because it's done in a way that's intended for their age group. Bright colors, cartoons, cartoon characters, coloring books, worksheets, and things like that. So I think that was a long-winded answer to say, respect their perspective, empathize with their perspective, and challenge them to consider some of the data. And I'm happy to brainstorm some of those techniques anytime.
Thank you so much, Belinda.
Sure.
We are at 12:02 p.m. So we are going.
So sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is great information, and thank you for answering our audience questions. If you do have additional questions or are just curious about how the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children might be able to help strengthen programs at your club, whether it's through some of their programs or other resources provided, please don't hesitate to reach out to Belinda. Her contact information will be included in our follow-up email. So just a couple of quick reminders before we close out for today. We do a webcast every single month, with the exception of months when we host the Promise Awards and our annual virtual conference. So mark your calendars for every third Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The registration for our March webcast will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. That'll be available on our website, in our newsletter, and you'll also receive some emails about it. Please continue to forward these emails and messages and communications that you receive from WFYC on to your members, to your volunteers, to your staff, and to anybody else who could benefit from learning more about partnerships or opportunities for strengthening your programs through World Federation of Youth Clubs and our partner organizations. Just a really important reminder coming up, we have a couple of weeks left to submit your interest in featuring your talented youth at the upcoming International Virtual Conference, Lead, Innovate, and Collaborate. If you have a performing or creative arts program at your youth club, we would love to hear about it and feature those young people as part of our conference. So send any questions or your interest to Tony Galveo, our Program Operations Coordinator. And last but not least, if you have any questions about World Federation of Youth Clubs, the information you learned today, or wanted to learn more about National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, please contact us. Tony's information is here. He is your lead point person for the webcast and some other initiatives here at WFYC. We are all happy to help, and thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure hearing from you, Belinda, and learning so much about this difficult but very important topic. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me.